All right, welcome everybody to this afternoon's Virtual Tech Exchange series. Today we're going to be having Cjf Tennenbaum giving us a hands-on session using IBM's MQ Bridge with their blockchain platform. Some housekeeping notes: if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A. You can raise your hand, and we'll get to you as soon as we can. This time we'll try something a little bit different. Everybody has the ability to speak. You have your audio turned on, so if you have a question, just pipe up. That way Cjf can hear you and we can delve into whatever the question is. We had scheduled another webinar next Friday, but that's apparently not going to happen because I have not had time to put my own presentation together on moving into digital twins and use of Unreal game engine in GIS. I got into it and realized that I have to learn how to make things in Unreal Engine. So I'm now working on that before I can do any type of presentation on it. All right, so let's get going here and we'll see what Cjf has to teach us today about IBM and blockchain and MQ Bridge. Take it away, Cjf.
Thank you so much, Bill. And I just want to, again, thank ESS for allowing us to kind of talk about this topic, and always wonderful and gracious hosts. So thank you so much. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about blockchain and the IBM MQ Bridge. And when we think about blockchain solutions are never just the blockchain itself. Usually, in my experience working on the different projects that I've done in the blockchain space, in the federal space, and working with industry, the blockchain is maybe 20%, 30% of the solution. And then there are all these other components that we have to think about when building out the solution, whether it's around additional security, whether it's the client application, whether it's reporting and analytics. All of these other pieces always are part of ultimately any blockchain solution that you build when you start to build something real. And feel free, if you ever want to Google and go and search on IBM blockchain and search on architecture and garage, you'll see a garage deck. And when I say IBM Garage, that's kind of our way of this agile both methodology and approach, as well as having garage teams to start to help organizations build things more quickly. But when we think about, they also provide architectures. And when we think about the architecture and blockchain, there are a lot of other components that we want to think about. So in this case, we're going to drill down specifically into one of IBM's capabilities, which makes it easier for us to start to work with our client applications, especially when we think about asynchronous communications and messaging oriented middleware, and allowing that to interface more easily with a blockchain network. So before we get started, and I jump into some of these pieces here, I'm just curious, how familiar is everyone with IBM blockchain and just Hyperledger Fabric and blockchain in general? Because I'm more than happy to provide you with kind of a basic overview of IBM blockchain if needed. Or does everyone kind of have experience with Hyperledger Fabric and blockchain and permission blockchain networks, and just wants me to jump right in?
Well, I'll say here, of the three people that are on, I know that they've all been exposed to it. So you probably don't have to go into a whole bunch of detail.
Okay.
It looks like Cjf might have a comment.
Yeah, I would just say I'm fairly familiar with Hyperledger and have played with it some, so if that helps.
Fantastic, thanks. I just never want to assume, because I know that always gets me in trouble. So really what we're talking about here is these two different components or capabilities. Components probably not the right word, but technologies. And we'll start with IBM MQ. And MQ has been around almost as long as I have in IBM, which is a long time. It came out back in 1993. It's messaging-oriented middleware. It does point-to-point, pub-sub. If you're familiar with JMS, back in the old, I don't want to say they're still around, Java Enterprise applications and so on. Certainly, there are other MQ technologies that are out there these days, and messaging-oriented middleware technologies that are out there. But MQ really is kind of the thing that started it all. It's still being used by major financial institutions, Fortune 500 companies, all using this as a reliable way to move data from one point to another, either again using pub/sub or point-to-point, and it provides capabilities such as, for instance, it has advanced messaging security, which leverages PKI, private key, public key, digital certs, so you can sign and encrypt data at the message level. So what we're talking about here is, first of all, this one technology that's been around for a long time has helped solve the integration issues. And Lord knows, we're constantly, integration is still something that we're constantly working with organizations on to solve those challenges, to get past these siloed environments that we have today. And then we have kind of our relatively the new kid on the block, blockchain. And blockchain now, I've been working on it for, I want to say 5 or 6 years, primarily working with Hyperledger Fabric. Certainly there are other Hyperledger technologies as well that are gaining additional traction. You may have heard of Hyperledger Indy or Hyperledger Aries around identity and digital credentials, just being another example. And there are plenty of other projects that are either have been promoted to real status or still in the incubation phase under the Hyperledger umbrella, under the Linux Foundation. But with our IBM blockchain platform, as I mentioned before, and blockchain and the blockchain platform can run in a cloud, it can run behind your firewall. You can have a hybrid environment where you've got some nodes which are running in the cloud and other nodes that are running in other environments. There's, again, for any solution that you build out, you have to figure out what you're doing client side, the APIs you're going to expose, and potentially how you can take and work with that data and move it into the IBM blockchain platform, and how can we start to remove some of the complexity that's tied to doing those types of things. So if we think about our environments and what we built out in many cases, if we use something like MQ, or if we use MQ in this case, we want to, there really is, kind of a natural synergy here between integration middleware and blockchain, where integration middleware is usually bridging our systems of record, providing that integration with those systems of record, and then within the actual organization itself. And then we can go and use the blockchain now to start to share that information securely and in a trusted manner with the other members of our network, and with the appropriate privacy and confidentiality. Because if we think about Hyperledger Fabric, I always like to think of it, there's a tug of war there. On one side, it's all about trust and transparency, but on the other side, there's, well, I don't want to share everything with everybody. And Hyperledger Fabric provides those sorts of capabilities, whether using things like channels, or we can also have private data collections is another option. And I'm more than happy to talk in depth about any of those things. But really, there's some synergy here. So, how do we go about doing this in a, or removing some of the complexity there? And this is where the MQ Bridge really starts to fit in. So MQ Bridge, what it does is it provides a mechanism where we can now start to put messages onto our MQ queues, and then have that submitted or shared with the blockchain, submitted as a transaction to the blockchain, and where the bridge, using a configuration file and using the appropriate credentials that are required and a wallet as part of those credentials, allows you to simplify that process. So really today, what you guys are going to get a chance to do is you're going to get to play with the technology, and start to see some of the key concepts, and really get to do some hands-on with Hyperledger Fabric, with the MQ Bridge, and also get to kind of poke around with the MQ Queue Manager as you put data onto these queues that ultimately will get submitted as blockchain transactions. So it's all about removing the complexity while still leveraging the capabilities that a messaging-oriented middleware solution like MQ can provide. So what are we going to do here? We're going to share our data, again, with two different organizations for our solution, and I'll kind of talk about that. Blockchain, again, providing privacy and confidentiality features. Again, I kind of talked about channels, and when it comes to a blockchain, it's all about who you are, your identity, which determines what you can touch, what you can see, the transactions you can run. All of those things are provided with Hyperledger Fabric. Of course, when we think about blockchain, data is immutable and obviously applies provenance. Most of this is probably reviewed for you guys, but more than, again, happy to drill down deeper on all these capabilities that blockchain provides. So for our lab, what are we going to do? For our lab, we're going to use a artifact which has actually been around with Hyperledger Fabric for quite some time, which is called FabCar, if you're not familiar with it. But it's a network where you are working with assets which represent automobiles. And we're going to submit some transactions to our FabCar network. We're going to have, in this case, it's just going to be a two-organization environment. One organization being the car dealer, the other being the regulator. And we can see here that the car dealer, they can actually view cars, they can modify details about the cars, all those different things. The regulator is all about just being able to do queries, providing that read-only view into the blockchain. But in both cases, we can use MQ to submit transactions, use the MQ Bridge. And that's what we're going to do for the lab. So we'll get to look a little bit at some of the actual MQ queues. So we'll poke in there a bit. So as we put messages onto the queue, we'll see those messages. We'll see them get handled by the bridge. And then we'll actually query the blockchain and take a look at those as well. And also, when the blockchain sends a reply and a response, we'll see that in the queue. So that's what we're planning to do. I'm going to stop, see if there are any questions. Otherwise, what I want to do is get you guys up and running with the environment. I do not expect you guys to be able to complete all of the materials in the length of our session. However, we're going to leave the environment up throughout the weekend. You guys are more than free to send me questions if you get stuck, and I will do my best to answer them over the weekend and so on. So please, I don't want you to feel pressure. We'll leave this stuff out there for you to run. And if you need an environment past the weekend, you can contact me and I'll stand up an environment as well. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to bring up your environment. Hopefully everyone got an email from me and you should all have access to your environment. And just ping me or let me know if you don't have access to the environment. And the first thing I'm going to recommend when everyone has their environment up is this little button right here, which says Fit to Window. So you can make the environment larger in which to work with. So that's the first thing I'm going to have you guys do. And you'll see your environment gets much larger. Okay. And hopefully this is clear to everyone, no questions so far. The second piece that I just want to kind of bring out to everyone's attention, and everyone should have access to the lab guide as well. So if you don't have access to the lab guide, let me know that. And I'll just see if I can bring up the lab guide. There we go. So in the lab guide, we'll take you through each of these steps and we'll go through those. But I wanted to also call out that there's a cut and paste capability. And here we also kind of talk to the actual scenario itself, the dealer, the regulator, et cetera. I'll let you read through that on your own time. But if I want to cut and paste something and put it into our environment, so let's just say I copy this IBM Blockchain Platform string, you're going to go into this clipboard here, right up top, and then you're going to paste this. Now, the very first time you do it probably won't work for you. But if I go in here now and I say go to paste, like I said, it doesn't work the very first time. It'll work from this point on. But if I paste this again, and now if I go in here and I double click, now I'll have a paste option. And there's IBM Blockchain Platform. And you can usually do like a double click. I know on my MacBook, I just use the 2 fingers and I double click and I get that menu. But just wanted to check with everyone, see if everyone's okay with that, because this environment, if you haven't used it the first time, those are just a couple of little nuances and things that I want everybody to know.
I've got my environment going.
Okay, fantastic. If anyone has any problems, by all means, I'm more than happy to work with them and help them on this. So what we're going to do, again, we won't get through everything in this session initially, but I'm more than happy to help, is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up VS Code and work at your own pace, or you can work with me. I'll just kind of go along and start working through this with you guys, and you can either follow along with me or you can, again, do it at your own pace. But we're going to open up VS Code. Okay. Whoops.
So just to let you know, I'm using government equipment, so I'm blocked out, but I'll just follow the thing along.
Okay, my apologies. I was kind of wondering if anyone was going to have any challenges there. I know sometimes they got to whitelist those environments. So within VS Code, for those of you that aren't familiar with the blockchain extension for VS Code that IBM has, you can always just search for extensions on the extensions little piece here for VS Code, assuming that you're familiar with VS Code, that is. But it's a great tool for blockchain developers. You can just search on blockchain. And if you do so, you won't have to hear, because we already have it set up, but there's an IBM Blockchain Platform extension you can always set up in your own environment. This little icon here is the IBM Blockchain Platform extension. When you click on it the first time, it'll take a minute or two to actually come up. Then it'll come here. There's a great set of tutorials for anyone that's interested. And you can actually earn an IBM badge. I highly recommend going through the introduction series. One of the nice things is it will set up a local Hyperledger Fabric environment for you on your laptop, assuming you have the prerequisites such as Docker running in your environment. Okay. Let's see, moving right along. Back to, so we open up VS Code, we go into the blockchain extension. Now, one of the things we're going to just really briefly look at, and you won't have to do this step here because I've already set everything up for you in your environments, is that there's an Ansible playbook. So for those of you that are familiar with Ansible or not familiar with Ansible, Ansible is a tool for automation. You can create what are called playbooks. What's nice about Ansible is you don't need an agent, but Playbook provides a way to automate a set of steps, allows you to do things, set up environments, configure environments on different servers. So this environment, if you're interested in looking, there's a YAML file, site.yaml, and in there, if you look at the terminal window, and the terminal window is right here, you can go in And I'll just bring up the terminal window. And in there, you can go in and you can see, you would be able to go into that workspace environment and you would see the Ansible script. Okay. Now, again, I'm gonna skip past that because I think you guys are probably more interested in some of the other pieces, but I just wanted to call that to your attention. When it comes to deploying a Hyperledger Fabric network, we can use Ansible scripts. I've done that in multiple environments, not just our own cloud, but also using like in Azure, for instance, another example. So you can take a look at that. You can look at the site.yaml file, and anyone that's familiar with Ansible, you'll be able to kind of understand that. Also, in your environments, you should not have to run start. The Docker containers should already be up and running. So what we're going to do, just to verify that, is we're going to cut and paste this Docker PS command. For those of you that are familiar with Docker, this is simply a command which says, take a look at the running containers, Docker containers in our environment, and then just format so it's easier to read. So that's all we're doing here. Okay. So now we should be able to go again and paste that, run it, and you should see these containers running. Notice that you've got a peer for your dealer organization. You also have a peer for your regulator organization, and so on. Okay. Any questions so far? And hopefully everyone has their containers up and running. If anyone does not and needs help, let me know. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to define our Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric environment into our VS Code environment. Now, what's interesting here is you have different options. You can create a new one from a template. You can add one from our IBM Blockchain Platform network. And you can also, in this case, because we have an Ansible created network, point to the directory and do so. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go back to VS Code. Okay, and we're going to define our environment. And there we say add an Ansible created network. And in there, what we're going to do is we're going to point back to the directory where our network is. So if we go here, we'll see that our network is inside the workspace, MQ Bridge, HLF, Ansible, and then vehicle folder. Okay, so let's go here. We're going to go to our workspace, go to MQ Bridge, HLF Ansible, and vehicle. And then we'll select that. Okay. Now it's going to ask us for a name for our environment. And the name that we're going to provide is going to be vehicle, if I'm not mistaken, with an uppercase V, but I'll check our lab notes just to be safe. Okay. Okay, specify vehicle with uppercase V, hit enter, and then we should have added our environment. All right. Okay, now notice that we see our environment under Fabric environments. So fairly straightforward so far. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to, underneath our environment, we're going to click on that. Okay, and we also have under Fabric gateways, connect in there. Okay. Whoops. All right. So there you go. So we are now connected to that environment vehicle. Okay. Hopefully you guys should all see that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to connect using the regulator gateway. And notice here that we have these Fabric wallets underneath here. Those are the different identities that we can work with. And in this case, for our regulator, we're going to connect and we're going to use the identity Ron. So there's a wallet in there for that. Okay, so anytime you connect to a blockchain network, you connect as you have to have the appropriate credentials in order to interact with the blockchain network. Now, if we look a little bit further here, I already accidentally did this, but you see that we have our channels, okay? And underneath our channel, Fab Channel 1, we can go in there, and then we have our actual Fab car. If we expand that, then we're going to see the different transactions underneath that channel, the smart contract operations that we can go and run. Everybody good so far?
I'm following.
All right, excellent, 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 excellent. Just checking one thing here. All right. Okay, so good. So you see the init ledger. If I can scroll down, I'm having problems scrolling, but we'll get there. There he is. Just slow because I think I'm sharing my screen. Okay. All righty. So far so good. Fantastic. So we have this 2 organization network. Again, each of those gateways representing the 2 organizations with all the gateways, nodes, et cetera. Now what we're going to do is we're simply just going to disconnect from our Fabric gateway. And if you hover over there, you can just click on this little icon with that kind of looks like a door and an arrow to disconnect from the gateway. So now we'll be no longer connected. Okay. Now we're going to export a connection profile. Now in Hyperledger Fabric, a connection profile is just really the information that a client application needs in order to connect to a specific instant or organization within Hyperledger Fabric. So for instance, if I want to go in and access the dealer org and their peers and so on, I can export, and I'm going to export this file, this dealer org gateway connection.json is what's going to get created. And then I'm going to use that for my client application in order to access the environment. Okay, so let's do that. So if I right click on that, hopefully it'll allow me to. No, I don't want to connect. Sorry, I'm having a little, I think, latency issues, so bear with me. There we go. Let's try it again. So there we go. Export, right click, export connection profile. Now we're going to export that into a specific folder, and we're only going to use the dealer org piece. So we're going to get rid of that vehicle dash piece. Okay, so that's what the name's going to look like, dealer org. And now we're going to export it into the folder where our client application is. So we're going to, in this case, we're going to export it into the workspace MQ Bridge folder, because the bridge, the MQ Bridge, is going to use that when we actually connect through the client app. Okay, so we'll go into workspace, MQ Bridge. Okay, and now we can export that. And we're going to do exactly the same thing with our regulator org gateway. So we're again going to export that connection profile. Again, we're going to get rid of that leading vehicle dash space piece in there. Okay, once we've done that, again, we're going to go into workspace. We're going to go into MQ Bridge, and then we're going to export that. So now those 2 JSON files are providing us with the information that we need, or with the MQ Bridge needs, in order to connect along. It's going to need the credential from a wallet, but as long as you have the appropriate credentials and the connection information, that's what it's going to use. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about some configuration, a configuration file in just a bit. All right, any questions so far? Okay, hopefully this is, all right, so once we've done that, we've gotten through the first piece of our lab. Now the second thing we're going to do is we're going to start to set up our dealer and regulator MQ environments, okay? So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to use the Ubuntu Explorer. And we're going to search for MQ. And there it is. And we're just going to take this guy and we're just going to drag him into our little left-hand navigation pane, our dock, so that we can use him more easily. That's all we're going to do there. Okay. Once we've done that, then we're going to go back to our terminal window. Okay, and we're going to change to our workspace MQ Bridge directory, and then we're going to run a command. Okay, so let's go back to our window, our little piece there. All right, and we're going to go into our workspace, and then I think it was MQ Bridge, was it, or did I mess that up already? Let's see. There it is. Help if I. No. MQ tab. There you go. Okay, so now let's go and cut and paste our command to do so. If I can just type it, but okay. And then once we're in there, we'll cut and paste this into our environment. Okay, paste that in. And that create queue managers is going to create the MQ queue managers that we're going to use there. Okay, so far so good. Okay, all created successfully. The next thing we're going to do is now we're actually going to create the actual queues that are being managed. So again, we can kind of just go grab this command, create queues.sh, and feel free to take a look at those commands if you want to see what it's doing under the covers. And that's going to create what you're going to have there is both queues, again, for receiving requests and for response back for both the regulator and for the dealer. Okay, so we should see hopefully the same output. You shouldn't see any errors. The MQ queues are created. There's the AMQ message for that, the queue getting created. All valid commands were processed. Life is good. Okay. Now, if we start our MQ Explorer, we should be able to use the MQ Explorer, and then we're going to be able to go and see our queues underneath both our dealer and our regulator, queue M1. Okay. And underneath each one of those, if I go to queues, there we go. We've got our input queue for submitting our transactions that ultimately will go to the blockchain, and then our reply queue. And that's both for the dealer, and you'll also see that for the regulator.
Hey, Jeff, I got a question.
Shoot.
All right. So this is for setting up the queues to a generic app. I think the FabCar stuff is a web-based application. What about with other IBM systems?
When you say with other, I'm not sure I'm following the question completely. So
okay, so we use Maximo, right? And what if we wanted to integrate Maximo with the IBM blockchain?
Okay, right. So with IBM Maximo, actually, we actually have specific capabilities that allow you to integrate with IBM blockchain. But let's say it's not, it's some other application that doesn't. You are still going to have some client-side glue code. Just like here, I'm creating these queues, but I have to have a client application that ultimately talks to these queues, and then ultimately talks to the blockchain. The same thing applies. So even if it was with Maximo, and I'm not a Maximo SME by any stretch, but for any application that you build, client-side application, you're going to define and you're going to have certain patterns that you may use when you're interacting with a blockchain solution. You might have simply a RESTful API where you're making synchronous calls ultimately from that application and then to a client blockchain application that uses the Hyperledger Fabric client SDK. And that in turn goes and submits transactions to the blockchain. And we have things in Hyperledger Fabric like event listeners. So there's certain different ways you can go and approach this. What MQ is nice is that it's provides a lot of other, shall we say, the asynchronous model, whether, again, working with queues, if you have like a JMS, a Java application, and you want to create JMS and use that approach, you can do any of those things. But at the end of the day, and this is my long-winded answer, you're still going to have to build out a client application, which is going to interface ultimately with your blockchain client, which is then going to interact with the blockchain. What the MQ Bridge provides is a simplified mechanism which kind of abstracts away some of that complexity when it comes to having your client application work with the actual blockchain itself. Hopefully that answered your question.
Kind of.
All right, why don't you ask it again then? I just want to make sure I'm answering you. So,
right. I mean, so that sounds to me then like we would have to design that client, which could be just a Java app that doesn't have an interface or anything, that interacts between the Maximo WebSphere application client and then the message queue?
that's correct.
Okay.
And now I don't know if Maximo already has some capabilities that allow it to talk to MQ. There very well may be some stuff that's already out there, but you're always, that client-side piece, to answer your question, always still has to be written. And that's going to be part of your architecture, part of what you're going to develop, or what, when you think about a blockchain architecture, there are multiple organizations with either a single API tier or multiple API tiers or multiple client tiers that are ultimately going to interact with the blockchain. And that still has to be written no matter what. This simply provides a mechanism, again, that simplifies how that client ultimately interacts with the blockchain.
Okay.
Okay. And does it, in this case, because it's MQ in an asynchronous manner. All righty. Moving right along. So we've at this point, we've started our MQ Explorer. We've looked at our queues. We've seen that we currently have input and reply queues, both for our dealer and our regulator end, right? At this point, the input and output, those queues are cleared out. There's nothing in there. So we've done that step. The next thing we're going to do, okay, is that we're going to now set up the MQ Bridge. All right, so we're going to go into the MQ Bridge space, okay, and then we're going to set up some, an environment variable, which makes life easier for us. So let me go there. All right, and make sure I am there and paste that. Okay, so we're all set there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to now run a command which is going to allow us to populate a configuration file. In this case, the dealer bridge configuration file. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to again cut and paste because it makes my life easier. And that way I don't screw up, make any errors typing. Okay, and now what it's going to do is it's going to start prompting us for a bunch of things. So it's going to prompt us for the queue manager name that we just set up. It's going to prompt us for a bunch of information around wallet location. Remember we did that export of the gateway connection profile. It's going to ask us for all of those different things, and we're going to enter the information here. And then it's going to populate a file, a configuration file that's going to be used by the MQ Bridge for us to do that. So if we go back now, this is going to be a set of manual steps. We'll start with, again, our queue manager name, which is dealer_QM1. We'll go in here. And I apologize. I know that watching me cut and paste is not the most exciting thing. So I try to provide you guys with as much context and information as I can on what we're doing versus and why we're doing it versus just the monkey see, monkey do kind of stuff. Okay. So we'll do that. Here's our input queue, okay, that the queue manager is going to use. So when we, again, submit our transactions, okay, then we have our MQ channel. And I know this is not the most exciting thing to watch, so my apologies on that. Our connection name, con name, which is in this case just going to be the port that we're listening on and the local host. Okay, we're going to leave the CCVT, the JNDI implementation, all the way through to password. That's all blank. So we can just hit enter on those guys. Okay, now the network configuration file. Okay, remember, this is the gateway connection that we exported earlier. And that has all of the definition information regarding the endpoints that the MQ Bridge needs in order to talk to the blockchain network that we stood up with the Ansible script. Okay, the wallet, that's got our credentials in it. Okay. And our username, I'm just going to type that in because it's quicker. Okay, so we're connecting in as Dino, and obviously we have a credential for Dino in our wallet. Okay, certificate and private key, we can leave that blank for now. Our MSP, that's our organization name, dealer org MSP. So get through there, to there. Oh no, now I've screwed it up. All right, deal with that. Maybe I can edit that on my own. All right, we'll keep going. Our runtime log file, we'll wait till we get to that. Okay, there's our runtime log file. Nope, wrong one. That won't work. Let's try that again. This is Cjf Fail when it comes to cut and paste. All right. And we're almost through. All right, now we hit enter a couple of times. All right, so I screwed up one place, so I'm gonna have to manually fix that. That will take me a second. And if you guys screw up, it's okay. We can fix it there. Okay, now if any of these are in there, there is a student bridge config dealer.cfg file. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to edit that file. Actually, I can probably, if I want to do it that way, student bridge dealer.cfg. Okay. And in there is going to be all the values that we entered. And I know I screwed up. Why did I screw up? I know I screwed up something. Sure, which one did I screw up? I screwed up I think I screwed up the organization. Let's see.
I thought it was the commit timeout.
Maybe I screwed that up too. Let me see. Is organization in there? It's this guy right here. Okay, change user org. That should be dealer org MSP. Okay. Set. I'm trying to cut and paste again. It's going to be the death of me cut and paste. All right. Sorry, guys. We'll get there. Paste. And where was that? There it is, dealer org MSP. Beautiful. Okay, so I think we're good. Everything else should be fine. I'll save that off. Hopefully everybody else is doing okay. Whoops, I don't want to save it there. I want to save it here.
I thought that was a nifty shortcut you had there to get into code. I hadn't known you could do that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. File, save. All right. Okay, now we'll get out of there. But I think actually the next part of the lab is just going to kind of take you through those things. So yeah, you can, I don't want you to have to delete. So you can always go in and just edit the stuff manually if you're comfortable. You can use VI, assuming that VI is on the system. I'm not sure if it is. I'm pretty sure it is. And just go from there. And now we're going to take a look. Again, here's the code command that I just took you through. And we can kind of see some of those things. Again, the blockchain network path, right? The blockchain wallet, the input queue, your MQ channel, connection name, queue manager, right? And in there, we should probably have, let's see, there's our BC user org that I just entered, that dealer org MSP where I screwed up before, okay? So take a look at this. This is the file that's going to be used by the MQ Bridge so it knows where these things are, okay? That's all it is. And just to be 100% sure, we can go and actually run a diff against one that we provided just to make sure you got everything right. So we really could have just used that one if we wanted to, but that would have been cheating. So now I can go back in here, and if I got everything right, I should have come back with the blank, and I did. Okay, so my diff came back. There's nothing different, so life is good. All right, so now that we've done that, what we're going to do is we're now going to actually start to execute some things. And there's a bunch of different files that we have out here. Remember, Bill, you asked earlier and said, hey, how does this stuff all work? Well, you still need your client application. We provide a client application for you that's been written. Feel free, again, to check it out. Look in the environment. It's a JavaScript application called Dealer. And there are other components and capabilities. You'll see when we actually get to do some of our interactive pieces when we're working with a dealer. There's another component or part of it called inquirechoices.js. And then we also have, for our client config, there's some JSON transaction request structures information that's there. All of this information, feel free jump into it. There's lots of good stuff there if you're you know, a developer geek, or if you're like me and you just like to have fun with this kind of stuff. I developed in a past life, and I am slower than dirt these days. I let the young guns do that, so and they made me into a talking head. Anyway, so we got our dealer gateway, and we're going to connect again as the dealer in this case. So the first time through, we're just going to go in, connect in as dealer, connect in as Dino. And once we do that, we're actually going to init the ledger. We're going to submit a transaction just to initialize the ledger. So let's do that. So I'm going to connect in, connecting as Dino. All right, going to our channel. And if we right click on init ledger, we can submit that transaction. Now there are two, evaluate and submit. It's important that you click on submit. Evaluate is for queries. You're going to click on submit transaction. You can take all the defaults here. Just hit enter 3 times. Okay, if you're curious about what these are, the second one is if you're pushing any transient data, that can be used to push information that's data that isn't part of the recorded as the transaction onto the ledger. So if you had data that you wanted to pass that wasn't actually going to be recorded as a block in the blockchain transaction itself, you could do that using transient data. The third piece is the peer targeting policy. When you think about Hyperledger Fabric and consensus, you have X number of peers potentially that have to endorse a transaction. Right now, we're just going with the default, but you could have custom number of peers that you want to actually submit the transaction proposal to. In this case, we'll just go with the default. Okay, there you go. No values returned from init ledger, but the transaction was submitted and completed successfully. So all good there. Any questions on any of this? All right, once we've done that, now we're actually going to get into our MQ app, and we're actually going to run our dealer app. So I'm just going to grab this piece here. This command, which is just creating, is going to run it in a separate terminal. And I'm also going to make sure that I cd this into the change directory into the appropriate directory for that. Okay. Now we'll paste again. This is the most difficult part of the lab, is cut and paste, at least for me. Hit that in there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to submit or try creating a car. All right. So we're going to just hit enter for this first car, MQ car 11. And when we do that, it's going to process that selection, and then the window is going to close. Now, what's interesting here is we haven't actually started the MQ Bridge yet, and that's an important thing to note, which means that at this point in time, when we submit a transaction and put it on a queue, there is nothing or no action that's going to take place to take that message off of the MQ queue. That's because we haven't kicked off the MQ Bridge yet. All righty. So what we're going to do now is go back to our MQ Explorer. And we go to our MQ Explorer and we go to our dealer queue. Okay, notice here now, let me drag this out a little so you can see a little better, that our current queue depth now has 1. We have a message on the queue. Okay, we right click on that. Okay, we can browse messages. Okay, and we'll see there is our message. We scroll to the right, assuming I can do so. There we go. There is our message data. Okay, so notice we have its nice JSON format. There's the submit, there's the contract, create car. It's going to create that car based on the information that we put in there. Okay, but again, we have not sent anything at this point to the blockchain. Why? Because we haven't started our MQ Bridge. Okay. Now I know it's 3 o'clock. I want to be respectful of people's times. I am more than happy to keep going, but want to see, does anyone have any questions so far? And you guys want, we'll, you know, at least I'm more than happy to take us through this piece here. Is everyone okay with that?
I say keep going.
Okay, Bill, I want to obviously, you know.
Yes, please.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so at this point, what we've done is we have submitted that transaction. And at this point, again, we haven't done anything with it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start up our bridge, our MQ Bridge. Okay. So we've done that. Go back to our window here, cut and paste our command. Okay. All right, and now he's starting up the dealer bridge. Ready, he's processing input messages. So now he should have gone and submitted a transaction to the blockchain. So if we go here now, it's running in the background. He'll create that MQ car 11 on the blockchain. Now let's validate that that car has now been created. So we can go into our VS Code extension, and we're going to run our query car evaluate transaction. Remember, this one is going to be evaluate, not submit. All right. So there's query car. Going to right click, evaluate transaction. Now, in this case, I need to specify the car because we're querying on a specific car, and I forget if it was uppercase or lowercase. So I got to look here and see what they had. MQ car 11. See, good thing I checked. All right. All right, I'm going to do that. The other things, I'm just going to take the default again. All right, and we should come back, and there is our query car back from the blockchain. Let me get this out of the way for you. So the car that was created, that now there's a record on the blockchain with that information. So we submitted a transaction using the MQ input queue. The MQ Bridge picked it up. We just did a query, and now we see that our transaction's on the blockchain. So you can see, again, how this simplifies the approach when it comes to working with the blockchain as a client, where I can now start to put a JMS message on the queue, have it in a specific JSON format that's required for my smart contract operation. And as long as I have that set up correctly, then I'm in good shape. Now, the other thing is, once our blockchain has handled that transaction request, it's going to come back with a response. And of course, it's going to put it on the MQ reply queue, again, using the bridge. So if we go back to our MQ Explorer now, and we look at our queues again, close this out. Close. Okay, now notice we have our reply queue. And if we want to go take a look at our reply queue, again, browse messages, there's our message. And if I scroll to the right, we see our message data, which is, again, in that JSON format, completion code of 0, code string OK. That's all it's going to provide back. Okay, so there you have it. We have now submitted a transaction and gotten a response back from our blockchain. And we have a message now on the queue. I mean, we have a response message on the queue, but we have our record on the blockchain. All right.
So then I assume that the message queue just runs. You keep it running, and then it's listening and passing messages back and forth.
You got it. You got it.
Is there a throughput maximum or any Anything you guys have noticed as to if there's a lot of communication, does it ever have a problem?
I'm sure there is a max that you can. I know that MQ is very scalable, and it's used again in these financial institutions. It is extremely high speed. I would think that your bottleneck is not going to be on the MQ side. It will be on the blockchain side when it comes to performance, just because MQ is going to move much, much more quickly than Hyperledger Fabric. And you say, well, why is that? And that's because of consensus and how consensus works. Consensus in general with Hyperledger Fabric, you have to have, again, multiple peers are going to have to endorse a transaction. And there are multiple steps that go on as part of the endorsement, not the endorsement, excuse me, the consensus mechanism that's used by Hyperledger Fabric, where you submit a transaction proposal to multiple peers in multiple organizations. They come back with a response that goes back to the client. The client at that point in time then goes and submits a transaction to the ordering service with the appropriate number. They have to sign, by the way, the endorsing peers have to sign. Then there's a validation phase that's part of this as well. So your bottleneck won't be on the MQ side. It will be on the blockchain side. And that's one more reason why, again, depending on the use case, you sometimes see either a blockchain is not appropriate, or you can use a technology like a blockchain database type of technology instead. Because even though Hyperledger Fabric, the performance compared to, say, a lot of the public blockchains, especially those that use proof of work algorithms, is much, much faster. I mean, we've seen over 1,000 transactions per second, but compared to a traditional database technology, 1,000 transactions per second is still, slow, right? So if you have a use case and the use case says, oh yeah, if I need to be able to do hundreds of transactions per second, or if my payload is small enough and I have my blockchain configured in a specific way where I can get like over 1,000 transactions per second, that's all goodness. If that's not the case, then you start looking at other technologies.
Okay.
All righty. So far we've done that. We're going to close our window there. We're going to go now. We're going to clear our queues so that everything is discard that response for now. So we'll do that. Let me just close the browser window there. Come on, Jeff. I'm having issues. All right. Now we'll go back to here, and not that terminal, our other terminal. There we go. Oops. Okay. And again, what we're gonna do is we're going to run the clear qs.sh command. Whoops. There we go. All righty. So now that we've done all of those pieces and we've cleared our reply queue, now we're going to go in and we're going to run the dealer app again. And we're going to create another car. In this case, MQ car 12. Alrighty. And again, we create another terminal. In this case, we go in, just use the down arrow key, select a lovely green Hyundai, hit return, and it will go and create. Now notice here, because we had the MQ bridge up, our client application gets the response back with a completion code string of OK, and the car add update was successful. So our client application got a response. I don't know if you caught it last time, but we didn't have that And that was, again, because we didn't have the MQ Bridge up and running yet. Okay. Now, again, we can go in and we can, again, execute our query car for MQ car 12 from our VS Code. Same thing that we did before. Pop it in there. Make sure you got your double quotes. Hit enter. Enter again. Enter again. And there you'll see there's our response back. So now we have our car 12 is on our blockchain. All righty. So at this point, we've gone through 4 pieces. Now, the next couple of steps, I'm going to say you guys can go and just run this on your own. Feel free to go and do it. But all we're really doing is we're running as a regulator instead. So what does that mean? It means that we're now using a different configuration file, okay, with different wallet credentials, right? A different gateway. Remember, we exported the gateway both for the dealer and the regulator. All that information is there. You can kind of see that in the configuration file. And once you've done that, then you can go and you can run query commands, because the regulator only has permissions to do the query against car 11 or car 12. Again, submitting the query through the MQ queue and through the bridge, and then it's going to return a response. So then you can play around, do a few other things. Again, these are all just different transactions you can run. But in each case, the bottom line is really the technology and the approach that you're taking is still the same. These are just different transactions that you're running and executing using this same exact process. So please feel free to play around with this, with your environments. Submit transactions. If you've got questions, if you hit any problems, send me an email, contact me. I'm more than happy to answer questions. And if you guys want a deeper dive into the MQ Bridge or MQ or Hyperledger Fabric and IBM Blockchain, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to do so. We just actually, I want to say about a month ago, IBM just provided another large code contribution to Hyperledger Fabric. So things like the console and some of our operations capabilities that we had that were part of IBM Blockchain Platform have now been open sourced. We're providing support if you want to just use the Hyperledger Fabric versus the IBM Blockchain Platform. I have to say the IBM Blockchain Platform, one of the key things to consider is we have it built with appropriate FIPS 140-2 library. So there's some capabilities there, but it's the same. Again, for all I know, we might have even pushed that into Hyperledger Fabric. I'm not sure if we provided some of that capability as well, but IBM is firmly committed to Hyperledger Fabric. We've got lots of interesting blockchain solutions that are out there. If you want to learn more about our use cases and what we're doing in industry, more than happy to do that as well. With that, I just want to stop, see if there are any other questions. And I also want to thank everyone for attending. Thanks for your interest. Thanks for the great questions. But stop, see if there are any other questions.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
You're very, very welcome. Blockchain is a topic which is near and dear to me, so always happy to chat about blockchain with folks.
And if you need it, Jeff's email is jeff.tenenbaum@ibm.com.
So it's actually, let me it's yeah, you would think it would be that, but it's not. It's TENNENJL at us.ibm.com. So Jeff.Tenenbaum would be such a much better, but no.
I thought that's what I was sending emails to. I guess not.
Yeah.
No, you're right. JL.
Yeah, not the. Yeah, it shows you how back. I joined before the when the internet was a figment of most people's imagination. So yeah, I have one of the old email addresses.
And if you can't remember Jeff's email, you can always email me. Everybody should have my email, and I can pass it on to Jeff as well.
Thank you so much.
And we've got messages from Jeff in my Outlook anyway, so that's great.
Yeah,
That's true. Yes, everybody should have an email from Jeff.
Yeah, Bill, I don't think I had that, but I'll contact you to get that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Jeff. I'm always impressed and like to see what you guys show with your hands-on. That's always nice to be able to dig in and actually do something and not just listen to something. That's very great. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it. I have much more fun doing hands-on anyway, even though I will apologize for the cut and paste. I find it a bit tedious when presenting, but.
Can you open the guide or instructions in your Ubuntu environment?
You can. To me, it's the other thing with real estate. But in retrospect, that probably would have been a much better way to do this, Bill. So I'll try that for next time.
There you go.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks everybody for showing up and holding in there, and even 18 minutes past 3. So again, this is the last webinar of the summer series. We will probably do another one coming up, probably October into November, I think is probably the next time frame for our fall series. All right, everybody take care and be safe out there.